Here on RikksFlix, we're going to take a trip back, well, probably not to the Shire. We're listening to the theme music from the Shire here from the Lord of the Rings trilogy of films. But where we're heading in September of this next coming year is likely to be back into the world of the Lord of the Rings and perhaps into the old world, the world before the era of the Lord of the Rings. For those familiar with the storyline and the world building that occurred by J.R.R. Tolkien in the history of the Lord of the Rings, there were several ages, and it was the age of Sauron that we encountered during the Lord of the Rings stories, but the age before that involved an earlier incarnation of the same character, and great battles were fought. It was the age of much broader distribution of the elves and a race of men called the Númenóreans, which is the race that supposedly Aragorn came from, who ends up becoming the king in the Return of the King, the third of the movies. So it's likely we're going to head back. In fact, the concept art that's been widely shared about the Amazon Prime series, which is the prequel series for the Lord of the Rings, seems to show the mythical land of the Valar, which is the gods, if you like, way over across the sea to the west, which is the land that we see at the end of the Lord of the Rings story. Gandalf, Bilbo and Frodo sailing off with the elves to go to that land of the gods. So we are travelling back in time in this prequel series, but unlike, as I spoke about earlier, George Lucas's prequel series for Star Wars, this one is not one that George Lucas had to make up from the ground up for the sake of those movies. It was already extensively developed by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's rich in content, and I think the Game of Thrones success has shown the rights holders for the Lord of the Rings copyright material, the Tolkien family and estate, that there is incredible opportunity here to broaden the vision of their father and visionary J.R.R. Tolkien. And so $1 billion has apparently been laid down by Amazon to put this prequel series together. We don't know much about who's in it or where it's going to feature, but we know it's going to go way back, centuries before the story that we saw in The Lord of the Rings. And that's coming in Amazon Prime, slated to be released in September of 2022. We will talk a bit later on RikksFlix with the Duchess of Roseworthy, Hannah Phillips, about The Crown's next series, but something else that circles around the English crown, and indeed the very first crown of the United Kingdom, and that is The Last Kingdom, the series that is going into Season 5, its final series that is coming out in 2022. I really enjoyed this series, starring Alexander Draymond playing Uhtred of Bebbanburg, who was already showing a bit of grey hair in Season 4. This is the final series, Season 5, which again got a bit of a run on because fans were that far behind the series that they really wanted to push on and have the series run for a 5th season. Quite a gritty show, showing the real crucible that was the time when the British Empire was formed or forged under the pressure from the Vikings pushing into England, and the disunity between the clans or kingdoms as they were of England at that time, with Wessex being the centre point of this kingdom. And I suspect we'll see more explained about the relationship with Uhtred and Athelflaed, and also the emergence of England's first king. We actually got something flash up in the on the screen when he first appeared as a young boy, Athelstan, the son of King Edward, the bastard son of King Edward. But King Edward himself had been something of a ward or someone taken under Uhtred's wing earlier on in the series, but has certainly emerged as a king of his own, and they've had their points of disagreement between Uhtred and Edward. And there remains the unresolved arc with regard to Breda, formerly Uhtred's partner. They've been through a lot, the two of them, ever since then. I suspect she'll have a critical role. Of course, this is not direct history. There's a lot of creative license being taken. But one of the big things that emerged during the year was that this is not the end of the storyline of The Last Kingdom. These are based on the books by Bernard Cornwell called The Saxon Stories. So there's plenty of material, just like Lord of the Rings, a wealth of material to lean on. And apparently after this final Season 5, it's not the end of the story. There will apparently also be a movie on Netflix as well following this season. So The Last Kingdom, I think, is going to be pretty big for Netflix this year. It's got quite a devoted gathering, as you'd expect, especially from the United Kingdom. Now, just still on Netflix, another one that I think is going to be quite large for them is a new live-action TV series for The Last Airbender. It's been a popular cartoon series and has been going for some time for fans of Avatar, not the world developed by James Cameron. We'll talk about whether they might finally show up this year year the new Avatar sequel films, but this version of Avatar is totally unrelated and is a fantasy series, but apparently will have its own television series. There has been an Avatar Last Airbender movie, but I suspect this one will actually be quite big, coming out in August of 2022, with Gordon Cormier playing the main title role of the Airbender. Now, one reason I think this is going to be quite big is because of its strong following in the Asian market, and I think that's why we saw the Marvel Cinematic Universe move into the Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings movie recently, was to try and grow its appeal with Asian audiences. We know that the American film industry has toyed with, in some of their big set-piece movies, having an Asian character to appeal to Asian audiences, but I think some of these stories that have got some sort of analog or connectivity with the Chinese audience, the Japanese audience, even the Korean audiences in terms of their mythology. I think these things are going to be very popular, and whilst you may not see a huge buzz about the Last Airbender TV series in Australia or in the West, I think it'll be very popular in the Asian markets. And if the hit series, the one that had 1 billion views, the new record for a streaming service, which was the Squid Game, the Korean origin series, I think that's said that the time is now ripe for these Asian Genesis storylines to start emerging for the enjoyment of broader audiences. So watch out for The Last Airbender around August this year. Now, speaking of just briefly before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just quickly dipping back into there, because on Disney Plus we will see during 2022 the Ms. Marvel series, and again this is a new movement for I guess one of the major cinematic universes, but also just the way things are moving in broadening appeal to audiences. Ms. Marvel is a character who's very flexible. She's a bit like Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four, but he's yet to re-emerge because of the copyright stuff that's been resolved between Marvel/Disney and Sony. But Ms. Marvel is a young woman who is of, I think, Pakistani origin in the comic books. So our first Middle Eastern superhero, and it's said our first Muslim superhero. So there's going to be a real effort there by, I think, Marvel and the Disney people to reach out into the Middle East and having a character that appeals to that audience. So Ms. Marvel, the TV series, will be showing up on Disney Plus sometime during this year, starring Iman Vellani as Kamala Khan. And it's fair to say a very Middle Eastern cast. But where this will connect, I think, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a film that was touted in the next suite of Phase 4 or 5, I've lost track now, in the cinematic world for Marvel, where The Marvels, a movie will come out which I think will connect Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel from this television series, and also a young lady who showed up during the television series on Disney Plus, WandaVision. That's the series that really sort of stamped Wanda Maximoff as the Scarlet Witch. Monica Rambeau, the daughter of Captain Marvel's fellow airwoman, Maria Rambeau, she ended up picking up some superpowers somehow. Monica Rambeau going to be played by Tiona Paris. So this movie, The Marvels, going to feature those three: Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, and Monica Rambeau. And filming began on this one in April. It's only likely to come out maybe in the February of 2023. It was meant to come out late in 2022, but like everything, it's been pushed back and outwards. But Ms. Marvel, that's a reason to be tuning into that, because it is going to link in to Captain Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and a new expanding direction for that cinematic universe as being a fair bit less Western and a much more global outlook on the characters that they see depicted on the screen in whatever Avengers or team-up movies come in the future. Now, I confess I've already started bleeding back into the cinematic world. We were very much in the streaming services, but talking about the movie The Marvels, we're getting ahead of ourselves. After the break, we will talk now about what is in the filming pipeline, what projects are actually underway in filming or slated to be released during 2022, maybe even leaking into 2023. Goodness knows, the pandemic, if that keeps kicking along, whether that'll push some release dates backwards. Among others, we'll talk about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, one for the Harry Potter fans in April with Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. Top Gun Maverick at last showing up supposedly in May alongside of John Wick Chapter 4, Thor Love and Thunder, the Black Adam film, and Mission Impossible 7 slated for 2022 September 30, and in November, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Supposedly also we'll get Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and at last, in December, Avatar 2, the big sequel that's been in develop for a heck of a long time. So we've got plenty to talk about next on Rick's